I'm Maren Price, a 32-year-old CPA in Atlanta, Georgia. This story begins when I was 14, in the silent hallway of our polished suburban home. My parents, David, real estate agent, and Karen, HR exec, were finalizing their split. I wasn't supposed to hear them divide their assets, which, apparently, included us. You take Caleb. His investment banker trajectory is secured. I'll keep Chloe. She's manageable. Then, the silence that shattered me. I carried my latest cat mask, but as I waited, the rain hit it. The paste ran, the newspaper strips sagged and dissolved. The mask I made to hide my pain crumbled. This was the physical proof of my parents' abandonment. Please subscribe to the channel to continue following the details of this story. Our home in the Atlanta suburbs was a perfectly staged, $1.2 million listing. Dad, David Thompson, was a real estate agent obsessed with curb appeal and ROI. Mom, Karen Davis, the HR exec, treated our family schedule like a quarterly performance review. Every activity had to optimize status. Affection was an unbudgeted expense. We didn't share meals, we consumed nutrients. We didn't talk, we exchanged data points about Caleb's banking career and Chloe's manageable grades. I learned quickly that in their ledger, I was merely the unallocated liability, the third, inconvenient child whose future wasn't easily quantifiable. My quiet presence was a threat to their polished narrative. But what was the quiet thing I did with my hands, my personal, rebellious CPA training, that ultimately became my only salvation? My siblings were quantifiable assets, but I was the outlier. My brother Caleb's path was set, investment banker. My sister Chloe was an easy variable, psychology student. I was the ghost in the budget, the one who didn't fit the Atlanta career narrative. My job was simply to be quiet and occupy space efficiently. I retreated to my room and my craft, papier-mâché. It demanded total precision. Each strip of newspaper, dipped in flour paste, had to be layered with meticulous accuracy, creating strength from fragile components. I wasn't just making masks, I was training my hands and mind in the meticulousness of an auditor. That focus, the quiet dedication to detail, was the first hint that a CPA future lay ahead. I learned how to build something permanent from scraps. My family saw quiet, I saw control. They saw a hobby, I saw the foundation for my escape. But how did that foundation start to crack as the suburban facade began to show its true, ugly expenses? Before the final, crushing sentence, there were whispers, the soft hum of the neighborhood knowing something was wrong. Dad was too busy securing new listings, Mom was too focused on the merger at her firm. They still paid the bills, but they stopped noticing the details, missing dinner money, a bruise on my arm, the increasingly erratic school pickups. My teacher, noticing my worn coat, asked if I needed anything. It was a humiliation. Mom dismissed it as pre-divorce stress when the school called. I realized the neglect wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate lowering of my valuation. I was expendable, the cheapest asset to liquidate. What happened when that valuation was officially signed off by the state, forcing me into the very system my parents paid fortunes to avoid? The court's decision was clinical, just like my parents' careers. No one wanted the liability. Ms. Chavez officially escorted me into the system. The worst part was not the leaving, but the handoff. My parents, the successful Atlanta professionals, barely glanced up from the paperwork. They signed the release forms with the indifference of closing a bad account. Life became a series of cold handoffs. Each foster placement felt like a temporary lease agreement. The Carters ran their house like a military base. The Davenports treated me like an unpaid tenant. I was a file number, not a person. My fear grew, but so did a new kind of survival instinct, the impulse to track everything, to maintain a meticulous internal ledger to regain control. My fear grew, but so did a new kind of survival instinct, the impulse to track everything, to maintain a meticulous internal ledger to regain control. How did this fear transform into the quiet, powerful precision of a future CPA? In a world where my existence was dictated by chaotic paperwork and cold handoffs, I needed a fortress. My only tool was precision. If my biological family saw me as a vague, unallocated liability, I would prove them wrong by becoming utterly quantifiable. I started keeping ledgers about the system itself, a quiet, internal audit of my environment. I logged the true cost of my stay at the Davenports, not the state's payment, but the emotional debt, days without fresh clothes, hours spent on chores. I documented the discrepancies, the inconsistencies. This wasn't revenge yet, it was training. Every entry was a lesson in forensic accounting. I taught myself that facts, documented meticulously, were the most undeniable form of power. I taught myself that facts, documented meticulously, were the most undeniable form of power. But how did this relentless accounting of life lead me to my first true sense of hope, and the beginning of my actual career? I learned the truth quickly: the foster system was just another business model. So I treated it like one. I started carrying small, black notebooks. My first task was the internal audit of Maren's existence. I tracked the state per diem payment for my care versus the actual cost of food and utilities provided. At the Davenports, I noted the exact minutes of my chores versus the time Caleb and Chloe got to spend doing homework. I calculated the emotional interest rate of their demands. This wasn't obsessive, it was forensic accounting for my soul. Every discrepancy I found, a missed doctor's appointment, a repeated lie, was a weakness I could exploit later. Miss Chavez saw a quiet kid writing notes. She missed the fact that I was actively learning the mechanics of power, documentation. Precision wasn't just my defense, it was my future certification. I knew then that my knowledge would one day be the indisputable receipt for their failure. I knew then that my knowledge would one day be the indisputable receipt for their failure. But before I could audit the past, I needed a future. Who were the new shareholders that were finally ready to invest in Maren Price? My last placement, the Hayes household. It felt like a home, not a cold lease. Dr. Ethan Hayes, cardiologist, greeted me with genuine warmth, not pity. Sarah Hayes, art professor, studied my face, not my file. They offered me coffee and a quiet, sunlit room. The silence wasn't empty, it was safe and, for the first time, felt budgeted for, an investment they were willing to make. Sarah asked for my notes. Hesitantly, I showed her the detailed ledger, my quiet audit of the system. She didn't judge the obsession. Then she noticed my battered papier-mâché sketch pad. Her face lit up. She saw the same precision in the numbers and the art. "Maren," she said, "your meticulousness is a gift." That night, Sarah showed me her home studio. It was chaotic, colorful, and real. She pointed to a shelf. "This space is yours. The paper paste is fresh, and the light is good. Let's build something." For the first time, my unallocated liability had a line item in their family budget, potential. For the first time, my unallocated liability had a line item in their family budget, potential. But was this gift of meticulousness enough to shield me from the deep, old wound when I finally faced my parents' ultimate rejection? The Hayes didn't force me to choose a path, they saw the connection. Sarah, the art professor, recognized that my obsessive record-keeping was simply applied meticulousness. "Maren," she said, holding my accounting ledger in one hand and my sketchpad in the other, "the only difference is the medium. Whether you're balancing a sheet or layering paste, you seek perfect, functional order." Dr. Ethan, the cardiologist, took me to his office and showed me how he logged patient data. Every detail mattered because a human life depended on it. He showed me that precision could be a form of care. I understood then that my CPA training wasn't just about money, it was about accountability, truth, and forensic detail. I was building my double identity, the meticulous artist and the fiercely accurate accountant. In their home, my talents were assets, not liabilities. I spent my afternoons layering paper, my evenings studying ledgers. Atlanta felt less like a hostile city and more like a spreadsheet I was finally learning to master. Atlanta felt less like a hostile city and more like a spreadsheet I was finally learning to master. But before I could close the books on my childhood, I had to face one final, agonizing audit, the last plea to the parents who abandoned me. The Hayes didn't just give me a home, they gave me a 5-year business plan. Sarah enrolled me in advanced math classes. Dr. Ethan secured me an internship observing billing cycles at his clinic. My CPA training was no longer an internal audit of my trauma, but a strategic investment in Maren Incorporated. Every night, the art studio desk was covered in textbooks, not just paint. To secure my escape, I needed the full scholarship. I worked relentlessly on my applications, using my detailed logs from the foster system as proof of resilience and forensic skill. My essay wasn't about overcoming tragedy, it was about the undeniable power of accurate documentation. I argued that my meticulousness, born from survival, made me the perfect candidate for a career demanding absolute truth. Sarah spent hours helping me craft the artistic narrative of my life, how papier-mâché prepared me for accounting, how layer-by-layer healing mirrored double-entry bookkeeping. Dr. Ethan prepared me for the financial interviews, teaching me to present my past, not as debt, but as capital accrued through hardship. They were teaching me to translate pain into profit, not for money, but for freedom. The scholarship interview in downtown Atlanta was the most important meeting of my life. I didn't wear a mask. I presented my CPA skills early, I listed the grants they received, the funding gaps they faced, and offered solutions. I audited the foundation itself. I secured the spot. I had leveraged my trauma into my biggest asset, a full-ride scholarship to study accounting. With that scholarship secured, I had officially minimized my liabilities and maximized my future assets. I was ready to close the final file. But before I could focus entirely on college, I had to attempt one last, painful reconciliation with the people who cut me loose. I picked up the phone. But before I could focus entirely on college, I had to attempt one last, painful reconciliation with the people who cut me loose. I picked up the phone. What was the final, transactional sentence they gave me, and how did that deep sting of rejection lead to my greatest self-declaration? I had the scholarship, I had the Hayes. All I needed was one final, clean closure. I called Mom, Karen Davis, requesting a short visit during the holiday break, a final, small attempt at reconciliation. My heart was pounding, the only thing louder than the silence on the line. I just wanted 1 hour to confirm that I was still human to them. Mom's voice was the familiar corporate drone. Maren, darling, we appreciate the thought, but it's Q4. Dad and I are slammed with year-end closings and Caleb's pre-MBA applications. Plus, introducing you now would only complicate the new family dynamic. It's an unnecessary liability. Liability. That's all I was. I stood there, phone dropping. Tears finally free-falling, not tears of rejection, but of clarity. I grieved the fantasy of the family I thought I had. They had chosen money, status, and ease over their own child, and their final word was not "I love you," but liability. The precise, calculated indifference was the final audit of our relationship. The accounts were closed. Sarah found me in the art studio, surrounded by dried clay and untouched ledgers. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered truth. She saw the wound that my parents' accounting had left. Maren, the hole they left inside you isn't your shape. It's theirs. They tried to quantify your worth, but worth is non-negotiable. You're not a cost center, you're the ultimate asset. They simply didn't know how to book the entry. Her words were the final closing statement. The Hayes family had successfully liquidated my emotional debt and invested in my future equity. I dried my tears, picked up my ledger, and crossed out my old name. I realized I didn't need their apology. I needed my CPA, my art, and the family who had chosen me. The choice was clear. I would build my own financial kingdom in Atlanta, far from their suburban facade. The choice was clear. I would build my own financial kingdom in Atlanta, far from their suburban facade. But how did the Hayes family make the ultimate, permanent choice to invest in me, and what was my final, quiet response? After Mom's refusal, the grief hit, but it was quickly replaced by a sharp, clear calculation. My parents offered zero ROI on my emotional investment. Continuing to seek their approval was fiscal irresponsibility. I needed to perform a massive write-off of my past. I went back to my ledger. I listed the total emotional debt, the phone call refusal, the public humiliation, the initial abandonment. Then, the assets, Sarah's mentorship, Dr. Ethan's stability, the full scholarship. The balance sheet was overwhelmingly clear. The Hayes represented solvency. My focus shifted completely. I wasn't fighting for forgiveness. I was fighting for financial and emotional self-sovereignty. My CPA career would not be about making money for someone else's company. It would be the proof of my own competence and worth, a final, undeniable report card to the world. The Hayes didn't offer a contract, they offered commitment. They didn't ask for thanks, they asked for me to thrive. I stopped thinking of them as foster parents and started seeing them as my board of directors, the only people whose investment strategy truly aligned with my growth. I redefined my goals in CPA terms. Goal 1. Pass the exams on the first try, zero tolerance for error. Goal 2. Graduate debt-free. Goal 3. Open my own boutique practice in Atlanta, specializing in clients who prioritize passion over profit, the opposite of my birth family. I began working on a new papier-mâché mask. Not the shattered cat mask, but a simple, human face with clearly defined lines. I filled the hairline fractures with gold paint, a Japanese technique called kintsugi, repairing the broken with beauty. It was an affirmation that my flaws were the source of my strength. My old family saw me as a bad investment that needed to be liquidated. The Hayes saw me as undervalued equity. This was the ultimate betrayal story, not the abandonment itself, but the deliberate, calculated preference for financial gain over familial connection. They provided the trauma, the Hayes provided the tools for the audit. I realized I didn't need their apology to be free. The truth, meticulously documented in my ledger and symbolically repaired in my art, was enough. I was ready to move from survival mode to thriving mode. Atlanta was large, but I would make my space, and I would control my own numbers. My new path was secure. But the Hayes knew that commitment wasn't just about emotional support, it was legal. The next step wasn't mine to take. It was theirs. It was the moment they asked me to change my name forever. It was the moment they asked me to change my name forever. What was the ultimate emotional balance sheet when the Hayes offered me permanent equity, and how did my biological parents react to the final paperwork? I was 18, preparing for college. The Hayes house wasn't temporary housing, it was my foundation. I'd earned my full scholarship, minimizing all debt, and my ledger was clean. We were sitting around the kitchen island, drinking tea, like any normal Atlanta family. This was earned solvency. Dr. Ethan cleared his throat. It was a serious gesture, like before a major investment pitch. Sarah reached for my hand. The mood shifted. This wasn't about grades or colleges, this was about the final, permanent accounting of my life. Maren, you've secured your future. But we want to secure our family. Adoption isn't about status, it's about commitment. We want you to be a Hayes. Permanently. You are the ultimate asset we always wanted to book. Relief hit me like a double-entry journal balancing perfectly. It was the inevitable, correct conclusion to years of calculation. The emotion wasn't sadness, but the deep, quiet validation that I had finally been chosen. My worth was non-negotiable, and they paid the ultimate premium. We saw your meticulousness, Maren. We saw your pain and capacity to build. Your past is liquidated. Your new equity is fully vested. We are your home. Say yes, and we'll start the legal paperwork tomorrow. I smiled. The CPA future was real, but the Hayes name was the final certification of my emotional solvency. Yes, I said, simple and final. My revenge wouldn't be dramatic, it would be the quiet, legal finality of signing off on my old life. My revenge wouldn't be dramatic, it would be the quiet, legal finality of signing off on my old life. What happened when my biological parents, the real estate agent and the HR executive, received the papers requesting them to permanently sign away their last remaining liability? The adoption paperwork was the final audit report on my life. The legal notification was sent to David Thompson, real estate agent, and Karen Davis, HR executive, requesting their final signature to relinquish parental rights permanently. This wasn't asking for forgiveness, it was asking for a clean, legal write-off of my existence from their ledger. The Hayes lawyer predicted a fight, a sudden surge of parental territorialism. But I knew my parents better. They hated complexity and unallocated liabilities. My existence was, for them, a long-term opportunity cost that had finally been eliminated by the state. They wouldn't fight for me, they would celebrate the closure. The signed papers came back within 3 business days. No letters. No phone calls. No personal messages. Just 2 crisp, efficient signatures next to the word relinquished. It was the most perfect summation of our relationship. They processed my dismissal with the same cold competence they applied to a bad quarter or a redundant employee. Sarah cried when the lawyer called. Not for sadness, but for the stark cruelty of it. Dr. Ethan just shook his head. They understood that this final act, devoid of emotion, was the most profound confirmation of their betrayal. My parents hadn't just given me away, they had outsourced their parenthood. In the adoption hearing, the judge asked me my new name. I stood up, not as the 14-year-old liability, but as the CPA in training. Maren Hayes, I stated clearly. My old identity was formally liquidated. Maren Price was deleted from the ledger, replaced by the full equity of Maren Hayes. I closed the final chapter that day. My revenge was complete, and it wasn't a drama. It was a balance sheet showing that one side had zeroed out its moral capital, while the other side, the Hayes, had maximized its emotional investment. My old family's biggest mistake? They thought a child's worth was calculated only by the balance sheet. My old family's biggest mistake? They thought a child's worth was calculated only by the balance sheet. Now, 20 years later, how did I, Maren Hayes, CPA, finally use my unique skill set to confront my past and deliver the quietest, most undeniable form of revenge? I am Coraline Hayes, CPA, age 30. I run a specialized boutique accounting firm in Atlanta. My office overlooks the city, a city my birth parents spent their lives trying to master through status and real estate. I mastered it through meticulousness. My career is structured order, my studio, right next door, is creative chaos. The two halves of my identity, the accountant and the artist, are perfectly balanced, like a flawless double entry book. The same precision I used to layer paper strips now keeps my clients compliant and solvent. I built strength from fragile components. I am a master of documentation, whether it's a PL statement or a papier-mâché mask. In the studio, the repaired cat mask, the one I made at 14, sits on my shelf. I painted the fractures with gold, the kintsugi philosophy. The breaking wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a different one. It is a daily reminder that the flaws are the source of my strength, the undeniable evidence of my self-made worth. I am no longer the unallocated liability. I am the final authority. The girl who feared the system now understands the mechanics of power, documentation, audit, and indisputable facts. My revenge is not a grand speech or a dramatic confrontation, it is my existence, successful and chosen, in the city they failed to truly conquer. They reached out, of course, after Coraline Hayes became an Atlanta success story. But my ledger is closed. I owe them nothing. I didn't need their apology to be free, I needed their signature on the final paperwork. And they gave me that. That was their only valuable contribution to my solvency. My mother took my sister, my father took my brother, and the state took me. But the Hayes chose me. The ultimate choice was not theirs, it was mine. I chose to thrive, to build my own equity, and to say one final, quiet, definitive no. I chose to thrive, to build my own equity, and to say one final, quiet, definitive no. If you were me, would you have chosen the peace of a closed account, or would you have audited their current lives? I stand in my Atlanta studio. I am a success story, a CPA who deals in indisputable facts. Yet the most valuable truth I ever documented wasn't in a tax code, it was here, in this quiet, creative chaos, far from the polished, sterile suburbs where I was discarded. My parents' final rejection, that cold, transactional relinquished signature, was the last entry needed to close my old ledger. It was a debt written off, a liability permanently cleared. I took that ultimate betrayal and converted it into personal, non-negotiable, and fully vested equity. The cat mask sits on my workbench. It's no longer the damp, crumbling paper from that night at 14. It's solid now. Its hairline cracks. The points of fracture where the paper sagged from my tears in the rain are not disguised. They are highlighted with gold. This is kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The philosophy states that the flaw is part of the object's history, something to be cherished. I applied that technique to my face, my identity. My breaking point became my strongest asset. My CPA skills are the gold paint. I use meticulous precision, the same precision that traces a fraudulent transaction, to trace the fractures in my soul. I learned to balance not just accounts, but my own trauma, transforming chaos into functional, structural beauty. That 14-year-old girl in the hallway. Coraline Garcia was a piece of art created by others, meant to crumble. Coraline Hayes, CPA, is the piece of art I created for myself, a mask that is honest, strong, and entirely self-made. My identity is my greatest piece of work. The abandonment wasn't a tragedy, it was a ruthless business decision. But that decision gave me the clarity to see my own worth. When they chose their careers and their social status, they forfeited their claim on my future capital. The divestment was their loss, not mine. I often think of the girl who stood in that hallway, mask trembling. I wish I could tell her this: the wound is the place where the light enters. The breaking wasn't the end of your story. It was just the moment you were handed the materials for a different, better one. They thought they were minimizing a liability. What they actually did was divest from a future blue-chip stock, a massive miscalculation. They were the executives. But they failed the simplest audit, the audit of their own moral balance sheet. And they zeroed out their moral capital. My revenge is not a confrontation on TV. It is the piece of my closed account. It is the simple fact that I don't need them. My choice to stay with the Hayes, the chosen family, is the loudest, most undeniable no I could ever deliver. This mask, repaired, strong, beautiful, is the inheritance I claimed for myself. It's the legacy I'll pass on. It represents the truth that there is no wound so deep that art cannot reach it. No fracture so complete that love cannot bridge it. As I close my studio each night, I turn off the lights that shine on the mask. I walk out into the Atlanta night, Coraline Hayes, carrying this truth like a talisman. I am whole because I allowed myself to be broken and then rebuilt meticulously. So I ask you, when the people who should have held you let you shatter, what would you choose? The peace of a closed account, or the endless debt of seeking apology? Because for me, the answer is simple. The adoption was finalized. My name was legally changed to Coraline Hayes. The ledger was updated. I walked onto the Georgia Tech campus as a new entity, fully funded and fully chosen. My goal wasn't just a degree, it was impenetrable solvency. Every calculation was perfect because every miscalculation meant vulnerability. Accounting was never just about debits and credits. It was forensic detail. I excelled because I already knew how to audit life. I could spot hidden liabilities, personal, familial, and financial, with surgical precision. While others saw numbers, I saw the trail of human decisions, the data that led to betrayal or stability. The Hayes continued to be my board of directors. Dr. Ethan funded my CPA prep courses, not as a gift, but as a strategic investment in Hayes, Coraline, CPA. Sarah helped me integrate my art, seeing the CPA license as the foundation, the dry, rigid structure that would hold the fluid, colorful weight of my creative self. That license wasn't just a career, it was a shield. It represented absolute control over my financial narrative, meaning no one could ever make me a liability again. I passed the exam on the first try. My revenge wasn't loud, it was the quiet, undeniable power of my new professional title. My revenge wasn't loud, it was the quiet, undeniable power of my new professional title. But even with my new life secured, did the scars of my past make me seek out the old ledger one last time? I launched Hayes Accounting Solutions in downtown Atlanta. Not a corporate tower, but a renovated loft studio. My specialization? Forensic accounting for artists, nonprofits, and passion-driven startups. I was auditing the soul of Atlanta business, the opposite of the corporate machine that chewed up my old family. My office was deliberately designed for duality. One wall, clean whiteboards for balance sheets. The opposite wall, a gallery of my layered paper art, structured chaos. Dr. Ethan said, "You audit their books, then you heal their vision." The CPA was the shield, the art was the blueprint for rebuilding. My first high-profile case involved a wealthy gallery owner attempting to hide assets. My forensic training, honed by years of documenting my own trauma, saw straight through the ledger trickery. I wasn't just accurate, I was ruthless. I exposed the fraud and earned a reputation overnight. Sarah Hayes often visited, analyzing my client reports like they were mixed media. "The narrative arc is perfect, Coraline," she'd say. "You use the gap principles like strict sonnets to contain a fierce truth." She taught me that true power lies in using rigid structure to protect creative liberty. The city that was supposed to bury me was now my playground. I became known as the CPA who could see the invisible, the human element in the spreadsheet. My birth parents, the real estate executive and the HR director, moved in circles where my name was now whispered with respect, not pity. Of course, the old world eventually checked my public filings. I got a clinical email from Karen Davis. "Coraline, we heard you are establishing yourself. Congratulations on your growth equity. Caleb is doing well at Harvard MBA." I hit delete without a second thought. My account was closed. My success wasn't just mine, it was theirs. Dr. Ethan never asked for repayment, he asked for me to pay it forward. Every client I helped achieve stability was a quiet thank you. They didn't just give me a home, they funded my revolution. I was now the sole beneficiary of their moral capital. I started running an art therapy workshop, helping other trauma survivors use structure, like layering, like auditing, to rebuild. I used the metaphor of the kintsugi mask. The broken parts, detailed and acknowledged, are more valuable than the original, unexamined whole. I saw Caleb's Harvard MBA profile online. His parents funded every step. I funded mine with the sheer force of my will, leveraged by the Hayes faith. His success was inherited, mine was earned. That difference was the real balance sheet I cared about. My revenge was the silence. The knowledge that I was thriving, entirely outside their control or need, was their ultimate penalty. I didn't need a shouting match. I needed an indisputable fact: I was solvent, stable, and belonged. Coraline Hayes. It was the best possible acquisition. The Hayes name was the brand of trust and stability I needed. The name Coraline Garcia, the liability, was permanently written off the books. I had successfully completed the most important corporate restructuring of all, my own identity. I look out over Atlanta. It's not a hostile city anymore. It's a beautifully complex financial ecosystem, and I am a master auditor within it. My life, once a disaster narrative, is now a perfect financial report: high assets, zero liabilities, and maximum equity. This is where the story should end, right? But in life, every solved case opens another file. What happened when my forensic skills accidentally uncovered the exact transaction that led to my abandonment? 10 years after the adoption, I was meeting a new client at a high-end Buckhead coffee shop. Then I saw him. Caleb Thompson. Harvard MBA, impeccably tailored, visibly stressed. He was pacing by the window, the image of inherited perfection and underlying panic. He hadn't changed, still carrying the weight of his parents' expectations like an unpayable debt. He saw me, hesitated, and a flash of recognition, and maybe fear, crossed his face. Caleb was the one they invested in, but I could see the cracks in his veneer. His balance sheet was high, but his emotional solvency was dangerously low. His words dripped with corporate approval. "It's Coraline Hayes now," I stated, my voice calm, professional, possessing an asset he lacked: absolute self-possession. We exchanged cold pleasantries. He was focused on networking, I was focused on the audit. He was frantically closing a real estate deal for Dad and was terrified of failing. The irony was suffocating. I, the former liability, had built a self-sufficient empire. He, the golden asset, was still enslaved to the corporate expectations of our parents. His success was leveraged, mine was fully paid for. For a fleeting moment, I felt a stab of pity. Not for the past, but for his present. Caleb was still wearing the mask his parents had crafted, a suit of armor made of debt and obligation. He was trapped in the system I had surgically escaped. My revenge was complete not when he looked afraid, but when I realized I was truly, completely free from his world. My revenge was complete not when he looked afraid, but when I realized I was truly, completely free from his world. But when Caleb called my office weeks later, did I accept his retainer, and what shocking transaction did he ask me to audit? My work is now divided: forensic accounting for stability, and art therapy for soul. I run regular workshops for others who've survived family trauma. We don't talk about revenge, we talk about reconstruction. We use the precision of layers and the logic of pattern to rebuild narratives that others tried to shatter. I teach the Kintsugi principle, but applied to the self. Your trauma is not a liability to be hidden, I tell my students. It is the source of your self-made equity. We fill the cracks with gold. We honor the breaking, because that fracture point is where you became stronger and fully self-defined. This entire studio is the Hayes legacy. Sarah taught me that art is the visual evidence of survival. Dr. Ethan taught me that structure enables freedom. They didn't just save me, they invested in a methodology, a way for me to turn the brutal, transactional logic of my birth parents into a language of healing for others. When I see a student finish a mask, solid and beautiful with its golden scars, that is my true metric of success. Not the millions I saved a client, but the single person who realized they were solvent emotionally. My parents sought external validation, my triumph is entirely internal and replicable. I think of the cold, 3-day return of the adoption papers. My birth parents thought they were minimizing a cost. They accidentally maximized my future worth. They thought the story was closed with their signature. They were wrong. The story closed when I started filling other people's cracks with gold. My inheritance is not money or real estate. It's this methodology, the fusion of art and audit. The acknowledgement that emotional truth, like financial truth, must be meticulously documented to be healed. I am Coraline Hayes, CPA, an artist, and a survivor. My ledger is clean. My soul is vested. My ledger is clean. My soul is vested. Now, let's look at the ultimate audit. Did I ever truly forgive the cold transaction of my abandonment? I was 30. The Atlanta skyline was my backdrop. Tonight was the opening of my integrated workspace, Hayes Accounting Solutions, and the adjacent Kintsugi studio. It wasn't just an office, it was the physical representation of my final, perfect balance sheet. No unallocated liabilities here. The CPA side was minimalist, glass, steel, and absolute order. My desk was a single slab of polished granite. There was no clutter, no hidden documents, only transparent, undeniable facts. It represented the rigid structure I needed to survive the chaos of my youth. The shield was polished. From my office window, I could see the high rise where my birth father, David Thompson, the real estate agent, had his last struggling office. He tried to conquer Atlanta through status. I conquered it through solvency. The view was a permanent reminder. I won the ultimate game of high finance. A single, unmarked steel door connected the CPA office to the studio. That door was the most important feature of the entire space. It symbolized the seamless integration of my two selves, the meticulous accountant and the healing artist. No separation, no compromise. Only wholeness. The studio was the antithesis of the office. Warm wood, earth tones, and organized chaos. It was filled with dozens of masks made by my students, all repaired with gold lacquer. Each scar, proudly highlighted, was a documented victory over trauma. This was the true, beautiful ledger of my life. My original cat mask, the one I made at 14, sat on a pedestal under a spotlight. The paper was stiff now, painted black, and the golden lines of Kintsugi made the fractured silver eyes blaze. It was the artifact of my breaking, transformed into the talisman of my strength. Tonight, people weren't here for the tax code. They were here for the methodology. I showed them how I used the cold, hard logic of accounting, debits equal credits, assets equal liabilities plus equity, to create an undeniable, positive personal balance. The Hayes taught me the value of being chosen. Your biggest asset, I told the crowd, pointing to the golden scars on my mask, is not inherited wealth. It's the ability to audit your own life. To acknowledge the debt of your past, write it off, and then build your equity layer by meticulous layer. That's true solvency. My revenge was complete that night, without a single hostile word directed at my birth parents. They sought to minimize their loss by discarding me. I maximized my gain by building an empire on the very skills they valued: control, precision, and financial indisputability. Sarah Hayes was there, smiling, holding Dr. Ethan's hand. They didn't need praise. They saw their investment pay off not in dollars, but in the dozens of healed souls in the room. I was their biggest, most successful, and most profitable acquisition. The name Coraline Hayes now stood for more than just CPA. It stood for reclamation. The girl who crumbled in the hallway had rebuilt her own identity, choosing the strongest possible components: love, structure, and art, and rejecting the fragile, conditional bond of her birth family. As the crowd thinned, I stood between the white financial board and the gold-repaired mask. The silence was perfect. I didn't need forgiveness or apology. I had something far more valuable, an unassailable sense of self-worth, meticulously documented and legally verified. The story of Coraline Garcia ended with a cold signature. The story of Coraline Hayes began with a bold decision: to become the final authority on her own life. I am no longer audited by the world, I am the auditor. The only thing my birth parents ever taught me was the brutal value of money. The Hayes taught me the priceless value of self. I blended the lessons. The result is this space, my career, and my soul, perfectly balanced. I closed the studio door and locked it. The audit was complete. The revenge was a success. But years later, when the legal system sent me one last, shocking piece of data related to my original case, did I dare open that old ledger one final time? The noise of the celebration is gone. Only the hum of the Atlanta night remains. I stand before my original creation, the papier-mâché cat mask. The one I made at 14. It's no longer a fragile, crumbling piece of paper. It's solid, sealed, and fiercely, beautifully repaired. I trace the golden lines with my finger. These are the tracks of my tears, the lines where the rain and the paste met. The kintsugi gold doesn't hide the fracture, it makes it permanent, a documented feature. That night, I was Coraline Garcia, the unwanted liability. Now, the mask is Coraline Hayes' asset. This isn't just art therapy, it's my declaration of independence. The identity I wear every day, Coraline Hayes. CPA, the successful professional, is this mask. Layered by education, hardened by structure, and repaired by self-love and the unwavering choice of the Hayes family. My mother took my sister, my father took my brother, and they left my life to the brutal efficiency of the state. But the court didn't break me, their words did. The mask reminds me that I absorbed the trauma, audited it, and used the emotional data to build an unassailable life. The face of the cat is the face I choose to show the world. It's not a disguise. It's the final, authentic version of me. The wounds are visible, the golden lines, but they are the source of the strength, not the flaw. It's the highest expression of my moral equity. I carefully lift the mask. It is light, despite its history. I whisper, "Goodbye, Coraline Garcia." That name is fully depreciated, written off, and finally, resolved. My job now is not revenge, but legacy, to prove that what we choose to build from the fragments of our past is always more valuable than the structure we inherited. My job now is not revenge, but legacy, to prove that what we choose to build from the fragments of our past is always more valuable than the structure we inherited. So, what piece of unexpected data did the legal system send me years later, forcing me to open my old account one final time? The awards began piling up. Atlanta's top CPA under 40. Forensic Accountant of the Year. I stood on the stage, impeccable in a tailored suit, accepting the accolades. This was not validation for my parents, it was confirmation of my impenetrable structure. My meticulousness was now a recognized force. Simultaneously, my kintsugi-inspired art pieces were shown in galleries. The public saw them as powerful metaphors for healing. They didn't know the specific family drama, but they felt the universal truth: trauma, acknowledged, becomes strength. My art was the silent, emotional counterpart to my accurate, financial accounting. Journalists tried to dig into my backstory. They found Coraline Hayes. Adopted at 16, a Georgia Tech star. The trail ended cleanly at the Hayes family. I had successfully managed the narrative, censoring the liability of Coraline Garcia. My past was audited and sealed. Caleb, my half-brother, reached out again after seeing my face in the Atlanta Business Daily. His tone was professional, almost competitive. He wanted to network opportunities. I sent back a one-line email: "I only audit fully vested interests." He never replied. The competitive debt was cleared. David and Karen's world continued its slow, predictable decline, a textbook case of maximized risk and minimized ethics. Their silence was the most profound compliment. They knew, without being told, that Coraline Hayes was an entity they could not afford to confront. I was their biggest professional risk. Every Friday night, I skip the downtown networking events. Instead, I am home, cooking dinner for Dr. Ethan and Sarah Hayes. The ultimate reward is not public fame, but the quiet, private certainty of my chosen family. The stability I lacked at 14, I now cultivate meticulously every single day. Sarah and I sit on the porch, not talking about art or numbers, but just existing. Her presence is my emotional reserve account, high assets, low liability. That is the true, non-monetary solvency I fought for. I am fully funded by unconditional love. The Hayes didn't adopt me to be repaid, they adopted me to pass on their integrity. My professional success is merely a side effect of that moral code. My legacy is teaching others to use their structure, whether it's CPA, engineering, or gardening, to protect their inner, fragile self. I keep one photograph on my wall. It's not of my birth family. It's a framed print of the kintsugi cat mask, its gold lines blazing. Underneath, an inscription, "The wound is where the light enters." It's a daily reminder, my biggest trauma became my most profitable venture. My birth parents measured success by status and external control. They failed to control the one liability they should have treasured, their moral standing. They failed to audit their own hearts. Their story is a tragedy of missed opportunities. Mine is a perfectly executed strategic acquisition. People ask if I forgave them. Forgiveness implies I still need them to balance my books. I don't. Their account is closed, written off as a bad debt. My life is the evidence that the greatest revenge is self-mastery, to thrive so completely that their existence becomes utterly irrelevant to your solvency. I pour a glass of wine and watch the city lights from my quiet apartment. Coraline Hayes. CPA. Artist. Adopted daughter. Survivor. Every title is earned, every layer of my identity is intentional. The only true perfection is the peace of knowing you are exactly where you choose to be. My life is the final report, audited and approved. The numbers speak for themselves, assets far outweigh the past liability. I achieved the ultimate balance. The story is over. But if a new piece of data, a shocking, final entry, was dropped into my lap by the legal system, one that could destabilize everything, would the meticulous CPA be able to resist opening that old, closed ledger one last time? Years after I achieved my quiet life, a thick envelope arrived from the Superior Court. Not a subpoena, but a final settlement document related to the dissolution of my birth parents' joint assets. It included an unclaimed minor's trust account, my original, tiny inheritance from a distant relative. The CPA in me couldn't resist. I opened the file. It was a digital ledger from 2 decades ago. The initial deposit, the small compound interest. My parents had known about this money when they let the court decide my fate. It was a negligible amount to them, but enough to pay a retainer for a decent lawyer. They didn't just abandon me emotionally, they treated me as a literal financial loss to be minimized. They chose not to claim this small asset on my behalf because the cost of custody, time, effort, and future emotional liability was higher than the cash balance. This data entry was the final, brutal truth. Surprisingly, I felt no rage. Only the cold, clean satisfaction of a solved equation. The missing variable had been found. Their motives were confirmed as purely transactional, lacking any moral equity. The final audit was complete, and the evidence was irrefutable. The trust account, with its compounding interest, had grown to a decent, though not life-changing, sum. It was technically mine. The irony was poetic. The money they had deemed worthless was now a small, final piece of their failed financial legacy, landing right in my impeccably solvent lap. I could have simply transferred the money to my own high-interest account. But that would have been participating in their transactional game. My final move had to be an act of complete, non-monetary self-sovereignty. It had to be a statement about the true meaning of equity. I executed the transaction. Not a withdrawal. I donated the entire amount, principal and interest, to the Hayes Children's Art and Therapy Fund, a nonprofit established by Sarah to help trauma survivors through creative structure. The money they had deemed a liability became a vested asset for others. The notation in my personal ledger, transfer of found asset, bad debt repurposed. No more anger, no more bitterness. Just the quiet, absolute finality of the numbers. I used the very tool they had valued, finance, to erase their stain and empower my chosen legacy. Dr. Ethan, who had quietly funded my CPA courses, saw his original moral investment yield its highest return. This final transaction was the full, complete repayment of the Hayes faith, paid forward, not back. It cemented the difference between inherited obligation and chosen contribution. I shredded the old court documents. The final chapter of Coraline Garcia was a data entry, and it was now permanently deleted. My focus returned to the present, my studio, my clients, my chosen family. The past was not a ghost, it was a closed file. Properly audited and filed away. I look at the framed kintsugi mask. The golden lines blaze under the office light. The true value of the mask is not the paper or the gold, but the process. The process of healing, the process of reconstruction, the process of accounting for every tear, and turning it into equity. My mother took my sister, my father took my brother, and they left me for the brutal efficiency of the state. But the court gave me a name, and the Hayes gave me a choice. I am Coraline Hayes. CPA. Artist. Auditor of my own destiny. And that is the final, perfect balance. I closed the CPA ledger and turned off the light. The story of family revenge wasn't about shouting or winning in court. It was about creating a life so fundamentally stable and morally solvent that their original rejection became nothing more than a footnote in my success story. The audit is done. The revenge is complete. The lesson is simple. The greatest legacy we can claim is not inherited wealth, but the meticulous, artistic reconstruction of the self. We are taught that family is an inherited balance, a non-negotiable contract. My birth parents used biology as a shield for their transactional cruelty. But the Hayes taught me the truth. Family is a conscious acquisition. It's the people who review your messy file, acknowledge the past liabilities, and still choose to invest. Sarah Hayes, my mother by choice, never asked me to forget the pain. She told me, "You don't burn the ledger, Coraline. You simply stop adding new entries under the old account name." She saw my darkness not as a flaw, but as unchanneled creative equity. Her love was the golden lacquer for my soul. Dr. Ethan Hayes, my father by structure, taught me the true meaning of unconditional stability. He funded my CPA courses not just for a career, but so I could have an internal, verifiable framework. He showed me that rules and precision don't restrict freedom, they enable it by defining the boundaries of safety. The greatest revenge against my birth family's conditional love was not my wealth, but my peace. I didn't need their approval, I had the documented, audited love of the Hayes. The quiet evenings, the shared meal, the assumption of my permanent place, that was the ultimate victory over the constant, paralyzing anxiety of my youth. The kintsugi mask is the physical manifestation of this redefinition. The gold is the Hayes family's love. It's the evidence that someone valued the broken pieces of Coraline Garcia enough to painstakingly put them back together with integrity and beauty. It's my ultimate proof of claim. I chose Coraline Hayes. I chose to blend my adoptive parents' structure, CPA, and empathy, art. My birth parents made a cold calculation to discard me. I made a profound choice to reacquire myself using the finest assets available, unconditional love and self-sovereignty. My only standing emotional liability is my infinite debt of gratitude to the Hayes. It's a debt I don't try to write off. I service it daily. Not with money, but with presence, loyalty, and by extending their legacy to others. That is the only debt that brings exponential returns. I never saw my birth mother or sister again. I saw Caleb once. My life proves that blood is a starting point, not a guarantee. The tragic truth of my birth family is that in seeking to protect their financial interests, they abandoned their moral capital. They were fundamentally insolvent. The girl who dreamed of revenge is gone. The woman who stands here, Coraline Hayes, doesn't need it. Revenge is a negative transaction. My life is a massive positive contribution. I closed their file, not with bitterness, but with a donation in my own name, solidifying my ultimate control. My new family is not defined by a last name, but by a shared philosophy: use your pain to create something beautiful for others. The art studio, the forensic work, the quiet dinners, it's all part of the Hayes method of survival. That is the inheritance that truly matters. The greatest freedom wasn't leaving the house that night. It was realizing I was the one who got to set the price for my own self-worth. It's an asset I manage daily, and I will never allow it to be leveraged, audited, or valued by anyone but me. I am my own final authority. I look out the window, past the Atlanta skyline, towards the quiet suburbs where the Hayes live. The lights are warm. My balance sheet is perfect. I am Coraline Hayes. My mother took my sister, my father took my brother, and I ended up in state care. But now, I'm the one saying no to the conditional past. Family is not a contract signed at birth. It is a promise signed every single day by the people who stay, who see your cracks and choose to hold you anyway. This is the truth I carry. I am Coraline Hayes, and this is the mask I repaired. This is the story of how I turned abandonment into my ultimate strength. If you were me, would you have gone back to try and save them, or stayed with the ones who meticulously chose you? I turned from the window, the city lights reflected in my clean granite desk. This story isn't just about my victory. It's about a truth I learned. Life lesson 1. Family is not an inherited contract, it is a meticulous, conscious acquisition. I chose the Hayes, and they chose me, which is a bond stronger than blood. The scars they gave me, the fear, the anxiety, they tried to price me out of existence. But I audited that pain. Life lesson 2. Your deepest trauma is not a debt to hide, but the source of your highest, self-made equity. I turned the liability of abandonment into the creative equity of my kintsugi studio. My CPA degree was my architect's blueprint. The structure of finance taught me how to build a safe, undeniable self. Life lesson 3. Rigid structure, whether it's accounting or art, is the true enabler of emotional freedom. It defines the boundaries of your unassailable worth. My true revenge wasn't the final donation of that trust fund. It was my simple, beautiful peace. They sought control through manipulation, I found it through solvency. Life lesson 4. The only lasting revenge is self-mastery, to become so solvent and whole that your aggressors become utterly irrelevant. The audit is complete. My final balance sheet is perfect. Life lesson 5. The greatest legacy you can claim is not inherited wealth, but the meticulous, artistic reconstruction of the self, layer by painful layer. This is my final report. If this resonated with you, hit subscribe and share your kintsugi moment below. What is the greatest asset you've built from your past liability?